tonight, wait tonight. Bets are off. I'm gonna find my way tonight, wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy faster? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight, wait tonight. Bets are off, I'm gonna find my way tonight, wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy faster?
Okay, good evening. Hello. Um, Look at me. I got my captions going and everything. And I'm only 14 minutes later than I was intending to be. So, all right, we are going to jump straight into our two articles. That finishes up section 3, and we'll get into, well, I'll read that, tell you about that when we get there. These seem to be fairly short articles. So, let's jump into them. All right. So, number 17 is A Crack in the Da Vinci Code. Is Dan Brown's Rosslyn Chapel Where He Says It Is by Jeff Nisbet. If you recall, he wrote a couple of the last articles, maybe 3 or 4 of the last articles. So, all right. Dan Brown, the author of The Da Vinci Code, has done what many alternative history researchers wish they'd done. He's written a blockbuster mystery that presents to an enormous audience theories that fly in the face of mainstream history. I enjoyed the book immensely and don't begrudge Brown his success. However, since a crucial section of the book deals with the Freemasonic and Knights Templar heritage of Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel, a subject I've written about extensively, I'd like to point out a major flaw in his data. As the book's endgame unfolds, Brown writes that Roslyn's geographic coordinates fall precisely on the north-south meridian that runs through Glastonbury, and that this longitudinal rose line is the traditional marker of King Arthur's Isle of Avalon and is considered the central pillar of Britain's sacred geometry. It is from this hallowed rose line that Roslin, originally spelled Roslin, Roslin, instead of Rosslyn, takes its name. Brown's positioning of Roslin on the same longitude as Glastonbury Abbey at a pivotal point in his narrative is one of the grander hooks upon which his story hangs, but it is wrong. Roslyn's north-south meridian does not run precisely through Glastonbury. In fact, it runs a whopping 17 miles to the west. So precisely, so precisely where is that central pillar of Britain's sacred geometry? In my Pyramids of Scotland article included in this book, I talk about a strange geometry of ley lines I discovered in Scotland's landscape. One of those lines, I report, quote, stretched exactly due south from Craigleith Island to the Cistercian Abbey of Melrose. Founded contemporaneously by Abbot Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercians and the Templars are thought by many to be two arms of a single order. End quote. I also write that, quote, if the line is continued far to the south of Melrose, it arrives unerringly at Glastonbury. End quote. But while the Rosslyn meridian misses Glastonbury by 17 miles, the chapel nevertheless lies on one of the other lines I mention in my article, and it's a highly interesting line. Let's go back to August 5th, 1999. While visiting, excuse me, while visiting a friend in the village of Temple, the ancient Templar headquarters lying just 5 miles southeast of Rosslyn, I was shown an inscription beneath the belfry of the town's ruined kirk, Scottish for church. My translation of that inscription, which is in part suggests that Jesus had sired children by Mary Magdalene, ran in the May 2001 issue of Fortean Times magazine. I had visited Roslyn earlier that day, excuse me, and had photographed a tiny statue in the chapel's crypt, a statue of a bearded figure thought to be St. Peter holding a book and a key. When I examined the photo some weeks later, I noticed that there was a pyramidal shape carved into Peter's beard that cut across the natural flow of the hair in a way that no sculptor worth his salt would have done except by design. Immediately below the pyramid's capstone was Peter's mouth. When I noticed that his mouth was disproportionately small, I suddenly began to make a series of decidedly spooky observations. Hidden within I don't know why I'm coughing all of a sudden. Well, I do know why I'm coughing. It's really smoky right here. We're getting a lot of that smoke out of Canada. Um, Spooky observations. Hidden within St. Peter's face was a smaller face that shared his mouth, but was proportioned correctly to it. The eyes peered out from Peter's nostrils with what appeared to be a hand chiseled alongside as though either saying hello or waiting to whisper. Then my spine tingled. I noticed that the chin of that hidden face formed the head of an even smaller being and was connected to a complete body. There he stood, left foot left foot resting on Peter's book, and his arms making a grand thespian gesture along the shaft of Peter's key, situated on the crypt's south wall. Peter's key pointed to the direction one would take to go from Rosslyn through Temple to Melrose Abbey. It is highly ironic that St. Peter points the way to the heretical inscription at Temple. In the 1995 book Restless Bones, The Story of Relics by James Bentley, it's implied that it was the Vatican's custody of the earthly remains of the saint as the rock upon which the Catholic Church was founded that gave the Pope's voice authority. Bentley writes that, quote, the Pope, whatever theoretical claims were made for him, in practice owed most of his authority to the fact that he was the guardian of the body of St. Peter, end quote. There also seems to have been no love lost between Mary Magdalene and Peter. In the Pistis Sophia, one of the Gnostic Gospels, Mary says, quote, I am afraid of him because he hates the female race, end quote. And in the Gospel of Thomas, Peter says, quote, let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life, end quote. By using the statue of St. Peter to reveal a heresy that could undermine the credibility of the Vatican by emphasizing the long suppressed importance of Mary Magdalene, Peter's sculptor would have been exacting a fair measure of revenge on Mary's behalf. But that's perhaps not all the statue was meant to reveal. Of the charges brought against the Templars at their trial, many mention the order's secret reverence for severed heads. The first of these charges reads, quote, in each province they have idols, namely heads, of which some had 3 faces, end quote. In my Further Anomalies of Rosslyn Chapel Unveiled, which was one of the last articles we read, however, I show there are elements of the chapel that are not part of its original architectural fabric. In fact, it seems that they have been added relatively recently, and St. Peter is one of those elements. Architect Andrew Kerr, referenced in my article, makes no mention of the statue in his exhaustive 1876 survey published in the Proceedings of the Society of Antiquaries in Scotland. So why is it there now? One researcher has dismissed that issue to the modern Scotch Templars as follows. Quote, when any real comprehensive study of any angle or aspect relating to Rosslyn Chapel is made, one has to accept that the subject is not static. Therefore, to conclude anything is not true. End quote. I suppose that Kerr should not have believed the evidence of his own eyes, nor I his account. I've visited Rosslyn several times since 1999, however, and must admit that I cannot see in 3 dimensions what I see in my photographs of Peter. Why so? The answer may lie in the great interest shown in Rosslyn by photographic pioneers Louis Daguerre, inventor of the daguerreotype. In 1822, Daguerre invented the diorama, a technique whereby 2-dimensional paintings could be illuminated in a dark room to give the illusion of 3-dimensional reality. He created a diorama of Rosslyn Chapel, which received rave reviews. Could Daguerre have guided the hand of Peter's sculptor in the opposite direction, hide a secret in 3 dimensions that could only be seen in 2? To create a tiny statue that would be introduced into the Rosslyn crypt when the time was right? And is it possible that Daguerre may have even been chosen to inherit the knowledge that would later write his name large in the annals of photographic history? One might consider that the Shroud of Turin, recently debunked as a medieval forgery, is nevertheless a photographically negative image. In their 1994 book about the shroud, Pinkett and Prince go so far as to suggest that the relic was photographically created by none other than Leonardo da Vinci. But on to Temple's ruined kirk. Within the ruin is a curious grave slab carved similarly to those described in Lawrence Gardner's Bloodline of the Holy Grail. See the accompanying illustration for an example of a standard Templar grave slab, which I'll get to in a minute. There is a picture here. Quote, in Grail imagery, just as in graphic symbolism, Gardner writes, the messianic succession is denoted by the female chalice accompanied by the male blade. At Rosslyn and elsewhere in Scotland, wall carvings and tombs of the Grail Knights bear this dual emblem. It is portrayed as a tall stemmed chalice with the bowl face forward. In its bowl, the rosy cross with its fleur-de-lis design signifies that the vas uterus contains the blood of Jesus. Okay. the vase uterus. I don't know. So, an example of the typical Templar grave slab depicting both a female chalice and a male blade. Okay, so here we are. I always do that. Okay, so whole thing, and then I'll come in closer. Okay. The temple grave slab, however, clearly shows a chalice but no blade. Why not? Let's read this inscription. Quote, Beatrix Lucy, wife of Henry Herbert, Philip Dundas of Arniston, 3rd Baronet, born 14th May 1876, died 6th November 1940. End quote. It is actually the grave of a woman who died within living memory, and, if we allow Gardner's line of reasoning, carried forward the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Researcher Tim Wallace Murphy claims that it's always the female bloodline that's important, not the male. Mummy's baby, daddy's maybe, I suppose. Temple was granted to the Templars by King David I, presumed by Gardner to be a Grail family member. Upon the order's dissolution, it transferred to the Knights Hospitaller and remained there until the Protestant Reformation, at which time it reverted again to the crown. During the reign of Scotland's first officially Freemasonic king, James VI, the property transferred to the Dundas family until recently passing into the stewardship of the Midlothian Council, where it remains. Beatrix Lucy was born Lady Beatrix Douglas Home. The Douglases and Holmes are two families whose names have long buzzed with possible Templar and Freemasonic connections. Sir James Douglas was Robert the Bruce's trusted lieutenant mentioned in my Bannockburn article. And Joan of Arc's battle banner is thought to have been painted by a member of the Home family. It's also rumored that a replica of Joan's ring inscribed Jesus Maria was given to Holmes' daughter. In Glastonbury Abbey, a similarly inscribed stone stands, and we might well wonder which Mary was meant to be immortalized, in either case, the Virgin or the Magdalene. Southeast of the temple ruin stands an ancient archway derelict in a field. It appears to lead nowhere, yet is so oriented that if you walk straight through it, as I did, you are heading on the same bearing as the line that connects Rosslyn and Temple to Melrose. Alternating stones in the arch are covered in a herringbone pattern that repeats the letter M again and again, as though driving home a long forgotten point. Okay, so two pictures here. Grave slab of Lady Beatrix Lucy without the blade, imagery symbolic of a male. And then the other one is ancient archway near Temple, Scotland, associated with the Templars of long ago. So here we go. First, the grave slab. No sword, but the chalice is there. And the archway. There we go. I don't know if you can see the herringbone. I'll come in closer, see if you can see it. Come on. There, you can kind of see it over on the right side there. Okay. Now to Melrose, 21 miles away as the crow flies. Scottish hero Robert the Bruce's heart is buried in Melrose Abbey. History tells us that a dying Robert asked that his heart be buried in the Holy Land. Carrying Robert's heart in a silver casket, James Douglas duly set off in the company of 7 knights, one of whom was William Sinclair of Rosslyn. After dallying a tad too long in Spain, the knights were pulled into a military engagement with the Moors. 4 died, including Douglas and Sinclair, and Robert's heart was returned to Scotland by the remainder of the company. If we retrace our ley line just 44 miles to the northwest of Melrose, back through Temple and Roslyn, we come within spitting distance of Dunfermline Abbey, where Robert's body is buried. History doesn't tell us why his body and heart weren't reunited, having come so close. Much is made in the Da Vinci Code of the fact that the original spelling of Roslin was Roslin, Roslin, tying a neat bow around the book's Rose line theme and connecting Roslin with Glastonbury along the same meridian. But it is Melrose Abbey and the Craigleith Island that lie exactly due north of Glastonbury, not Roslin, and Melrose also contains rose as a root. One accepted etymology of Melrose puts the mason's hammer, or mel, before the rose-colored sandstone used to build the abbey. While the abbey sometimes exhibits a pinkish hue in certain light, the root mel could derive from elsewhere. The Greek roots melas and mels means of a darkish color or black and a limb, respectively. Might I suggest that Melrose may mean a darkened branch of the rose or holy bloodline, brought to Scotland for safe keeping by the Templars and then branded into the landscape over a long forgotten geometry that far preceded the birth of Christ. And while etymology is on the table, let's now consider cryptology. One of the several ancient spellings of Craigleith is Craigleith. So Craigleith. The ancient one is Craglieth. So IE. So in the first one, it's Craig with an I, and then Leith is Leith. In the second one, it's Crag, so no I, Lieth. So the I and E are flipped. An anagram of Grail Tech. Okay. Um, Beatrix Douglas Home was daughter to the 12th Earl of Home and aunt to the 14th, Alec Douglas Home. Alec was secretly sorry. I don't know why I'm struggling so much tonight. Haven't read for a couple of days, I guess. Um, Forgot how. Alec was secretary to Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain when Chamberlain's appeasement policy calmed world alarm over Nazi excesses until the onset of World War II became inevitable. One more page. Alec was later appointed Foreign Secretary and dubbed a Knight of the Thistle in 1962. At the height of the Cold War, thanks to 1963's Profuma call girl scandal, Alec became British Prime Minister and later chairman of the still extant Bilderbergers, an elite association of international power brokers now thought by many to have engineered the state of the world we live in today, such as it is. If, as the carving on Beatrix's 20th century grave slab may imply, the holy blood still flows, and more importantly is still known to flow by some, what agenda has this knowledge been applied to over the centuries? Knowledge that we lesser mortals are not privy to. How many saints and heroes have been cobbled together to keep the common herd content with their lot, ever eager to do their bit for God and country, and how many sovereign heads have been toppled to bring us to this dark and uncertain world we find ourselves in today. But conventional thought dictates that Jesus did not have children, and that anyone who thinks otherwise is a fool. Nevertheless, I again claim that certain world myths have been hijacked over the millennia and secretly woven into the warp and weft of the source documents that historians use to write our textbooks. I've found in my own area of research, for example, that John Barber's The Bruce and Walter Bauer's Scotichronicon, both roundly criticized by academia as nationalistically biased, have nevertheless been vehicles through which the underlying truths of those myths have been slipped between the lines, truths that have gained even more purchase in recent years. It's been my hope these truths would not be driven underground again by silence or disdain, the two reliable weapons that have so often helped shape the approved version of history we are taught in school. But while hope springs eternal in the human breast, hope is fading fast. I fear that this particular human trait has been long recognized as a weakness and has been used as a familiar tool over the millennia by those privileged few who pull our strings and yank our chains, those who safely push the model ships and tanks around on the great flat maps in war rooms all over the world. Recent controversies surround Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, as well as Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. While Gibson's Passion points the finger of blame for a divine Christ's crucifixion, Brown's Code challenges Christ's divinity by suggesting he had a mortal daughter who survived him. Christians and Jews are once again at odds over matters that mainstream history refuses to adequately examine, and that faith continues to inadequately explain. Quote, "A truth is not hard to kill," said Mark Twain, "and a lie well told is immortal." End quote. My personal theory on whether or not Jesus and Mary had kids is that there's no doubt in my mind that they probably did. Um, because um, there was no prohibition um, for rabbis to get married and have children at the time. And he was a Jew. He was born and raised in the Jewish faith. Whether he went got away from it and traveled to the east, like some people claim he did during the lost years, or not, is irrelevant. He was born and raised in the Jewish faith, and I think it's perfectly reasonable that he would have taken a wife. Why they would have chosen to portray that wife as a prostitute and denigrate her, I don't know, other than, Peter the Rock hated women, you know, so maybe that was part of it. Who knows? Who knows? But I I really don't doubt that um, if any of this actually ever happened, if they even existed, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have been married and had children. Um, I'm also not fully convinced that he was crucified. So, you know, I'm entitled to my opinion on that. um, Moving on. Article 18, the real secret society behind the Da Vinci Code. Those Surprising Rosicrucians by Mark Amaru Pinkham. As everyone knows who has read Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, the plot revolves around the clandestine activities of an ancient secret society known as the Priory of Sion. The actual existence of this society, claims Brown, is one of the few irrefutable truths woven into his fictional novel. This may have been considered true when he was writing his manuscript, but recently the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the non-fiction book that introduced Brown to the Priory, publicly stated that much of the information related to the organization as it appears in their book is apparently based upon a hoax. They confess to having been led astray for some priori documents that they discovered in Paris's Bibliothèque Nationale, an admission that for a while deterred most researchers from further pursuing the legitimacy of the priory. Then researchers Lynn Pickett and Clive Prince published The Scion Revelation, within which they examined all arguments for and against the priory. I'll have to see if I can find that book. Um, for and against the priory. Their surprising conclusion was that there has indeed been a secret European organization with an agenda similar to the priories, and that the Priory of Sion may have been invented to act as a cover for the legitimate organization. Pickett and Prince were never able to identify conclusively this elusive order, perhaps because the secret society they apprehended is not very secretive anymore. The order they sought is commonly known as the Rosicrucian Order, although it has also been known by other related titles, including the Order of the Rose or Rosy Cross, and the Brotherhood of the Rosy and Golden Cross. Although seemingly innocuous today, in the past this organization has preserved many secret rites and passed among its members many heretical secrets that are just as explosive as any information regarding the sacred bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. The Rosicrucian Order, which we can now call the real Priory of Sion, first made its presence known in the 17th century through public documents known as the Fama and the Confessio. These manifestos claimed that the Order of the Rosy Cross was moving into a new public cycle, although it had already been in existence as a secret society for hundreds of years. Then in 1785, one of the order's Paris representatives, Baron de Gleichen, uh, spoke at a conference of Freemasons and Rosicrucians and claimed that the members of the Order of the Rosy Cross had been the, quote, superiors and founders of Freemasonry, which, while additionally maintaining that its grandmasters were designated by the titles John First, Second, and Third, and so onward, thereby ostensibly aligning them with John the Baptist, John the Apostle, or both. These revealed characteristics of the Rosy Cross were later woven into its alter ego, the Priory of Sion, by the authors of the Prior Documents and Hollywood, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, who claimed that the Priory similarly awarded its grandmasters with sequential John titles. Perhaps the most conclusive evidence in favor of the Priory of Sion being a cover name for the Order of the Rosy Cross is simply that the Priory is said to have called itself the L'Ordre de la Rosicroix Veritas, the quote, the true Order of the Rosy Cross, end quote. Supposedly, the priory adopted both this epithet and that of Ormus, a name that also irrefutably ties the priory to the Rosy Cross. Ormus is the name of the founder of an early Rosy Cross sect that existed in 1st century Alexandria. Information regarding Ormus and his sect originated in the 18th century with the Rosicrucian historian Baron von Westerode, who claimed that Ormus, a disciple of St. Mark and a Gnostic priest of the Alexandrian deity Serapis, was the founder of an early Rosy Cross sect that he named the Sages of Light. The Order of the Holy Grail. One crucial difference exists however, between the Order of the Rosy Cross and the Priory of Sion. The Order of the Rosy Cross never designated itself as the guardian of the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, which was the sole raison d'être given for the Priory of Sion. This was, however, the raison d'être assigned to the Priory by the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, not the prior documents that first informed them of its existence. Closer inspection will, however, reveal that the two orders actually mirror each other in their fundamental mission, which for both has been the search and protection of some form or forms of the Holy Grail. According to Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Prior of Sion has always recognized the Holy Grail to be solely the body of Mary Magdalene, while the Rosicrucians take a much broader approach. For them, the Holy Grail is a subtle power that any human or object can possess. This power has been known by many names worldwide, including the Holy Spirit, Shekinah, Baraka, and Kundalini. A seeker must simply find the right cup, sword, spear, rock, person, etc., that is endowed with this power and then absorb it into himself, thus initiating a process of alchemical transformation that leads to enlightenment and even immortality. Those human holy grails who possess the greatest abundance of this power are most commonly fully enlightened masters and objects that are ascribed the power of holy grails, such as the cup of Christ and the spear of Longinus, as normally items that have been in close contact with such masters or that held a part of them, such as their blood, and thereby absorbed their power. This sought after Holy Grail power can also be acquired via relics of a deceased saint, such as in the case of John the Baptist, whose head was discovered in Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade and became one of the prized Holy Grails possessed by the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were also linked to the Order of the Rosy Cross. According to Baron von Westerode, the Knights are known in Rosicrucian history as quote unquote disciples of the Rose Cross. Their definitive 8-pointed red cross was an ancient alchemical symbol of the Rosy Cross order and similar to other branches of the Rosy Cross. The Templars also entitled their Grand Masters as John 1, 2, 3, and so on. I am struggling tonight. I'm glad this article is fairly short. Back to the garden. Since the Rosicrucians take an expansive view of what the Holy Grail is, their service of guarding it is also more inclusive than the reputed Priory of Sions. While the goal of the Priory was said to be guarding Mary Magdalene and her descendants, that of the Rosicrucians has been to protect the lineage of Holy Grail masters and their alchemical teachings that can be traced all the way back to the Garden of Eden. According to the historian Arthur Edward Waite, in The Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, certain early European branches of the Order of the Rosy Cross maintained that their Rosy Cross wisdom was first taught by God to Adam in the fabled garden. This secret wisdom was then passed down a lineage of enlightened quote unquote sons of wisdom that included Moses and Solomon, as well as the alchemist Hermes Trismegistus. I'm quite certain I have that book in electronic format, the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. So we'll get to it someday. Could the Order of the Rosy Cross have literally originated in the Garden of Eden, as Rosicrucian historians maintained? A body of surprising evidence supporting this notion can be found in the archives of the Order of the Garter, Britain's most prestigious knighted order, founded by King Edward III, who synthesized elements of the Templars, the Knights of the Round Table, and the Sufi order of Al-Qadir to create his 14th century chivalrous organization. According to Francis Yates in The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, I'm pretty sure I have that one too, the Order of the Garter and its symbols, which include a rose and a rosy cross, were initially linked to the Rosicrucians. St. George, the Garter's patron saint, whose symbol is a rosy cross embedded in an 8-pointed star, also links the Order of the Garter to the Rosy Cross. Even more, St. George provides a link between both orders and the Garden of Eden. Today, St. George is known as Al-Qadir by Middle Eastern Sufis, who maintain that his true home is Kataragama on Sri Lanka, the island paradise currently recognized by Muslims worldwide as the original site of the Garden of Eden. St. George ties the Rosy Cross to Eden in this way, but he also provides a more direct link. According to the Hindus, who venerate St. George at Kataragama, albeit in the form of their deity Skenda Murugan, is in very ancient times, St. George was physically incarnate as a great spiritual leader who first taught the knowledge of alchemy to humanity. He was suffused with the alchemical power of transformation, which he passed to his students, thereby founding lineages of adepts possessing Holy Grail power. One of these lineages was taken west by the Nazarai Mandeans, who eventually merged with the Jewish Essenes to produce the sect of the Nazarenes or Nazarenes, the sect that John the Baptist and Jesus were born into. Oh, I see, Nazarenes or Nazarenes. John received this Holy Grail power and wisdom from the Nazarenes teachers before passing it to Jesus and other masters who founded Gnostic sects, including the founders of the Alexandrian sect that produced Ormus. Jesus eventually passed the power and wisdom to his successors, John the Apostle and Mary Magdalene, who in turn transmitted it down a line of Holy Grail masters that culminated with the Knights Templar. Thus, in the end, the power and the secret teachings of the Holy Grail came into the possession of many branches of the Order of the Rosy Cross, the real Priory of Sion. Whew. Done. That was a struggle tonight. I don't know what my issue is. But that finishes out section 3 of the book, or part 3. We go into part 4, the power and reach of the high-ranking Freemasons. And the very first article is The Star-Spangled Banner and America's Origins. Were the founders of the United States guided by an ancient mandate? And that's another one by Jeff Nisbet. So we will jump into that next time. I wouldn't dare do another article tonight. I've struggled so much for those two. But we will get into the next 2 articles on Sunday, theoretically. It is now, well, I guess it's still technically spring, but as far as I'm concerned, it's summer, and I've got a lot of outdoor activities that I do in the summer, so I'll keep up with the readings and gaming as best I can. Anyway, that'll be it for tonight. I am not gaming tonight. I am done. I'm going to get some sleep. So I will see you all tomorrow night. Have a good night, Nambro.